Our interview today is with Stuart Meyer. This is March 22nd and 2017. And Stuart, you are such an interesting person. I wonder whether you just begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, I was born in Dallas at Florence Nightingale, and I was actually born 2 months early.
You were
I was in an incubator overnight, but my mother said back then the incubators would make kids blind, so they took me out. I didn't even weigh 5 pounds. But anyhow, so they took me home. I have an older brother and sister, and we lived in Oak Cliff, and I grew up there. But we had a very Jewish family life. My mother's brother and 2 sisters lived in South Dallas, and we used to go every weekend. On Saturday, we would go to my mother's family. On Sunday, we would go to my father's family. And we always had family gatherings on the weekends. My parents were actually both born in Dallas. And
what was their names?
Abe Meyer was my father. My mother was Rose Einhorn. And my mother said where she grew up was like a little ghetto. There were 4 blocks in South Dallas and everybody was Jewish. They all took care of each other and they all knew each other. And my mother's family was very religious. They were Orthodox. And my grandfather used to daven every morning, and they would walk to the Romanische Shul. And
which shul was
the
that?
Romanische Shul. There was a Romanische Shul in South Dallas.
What streets?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Okay, sorry.
But we went there when I was little for services, and the women would sit in the balcony, and the kids, we would go down in the basement and play. and the men were very serious about the service. I mean, it was very, very religious. But when my parents got married, my father was Reformed, so they went to temple. And at first my mother felt like it was a church because she was so used to the Orthodox way, but then she got used to it. She was perfectly happy at temple.
The services weren't as long anyway.
No.
What kind of what happened during your family gatherings?
Well, we would all just visit, and we would, in those days, you'd sit around the radio and listen to the radio. TV wasn't even around till I was about 7, or maybe it was, but we didn't have one. And we would always have fun just visiting with each other. And my grandparents would tell us stories, and it was really a lot of fun. And we all knew each other, and we all cared about each other. And I know a treat on Sunday, we would stop at the watermelon stands in South Dallas and eat cold watermelon slices. That was a treat.
They were quarter of a watermelon. Amazing, wasn't it? Were those the ones close to Fair Park?
Right, they were. And then sometimes on Saturday, we would go to the lagoon there, and we would have picnics because there wasn't air conditioning.
So you went to what grade school?
Oh, I went to Rosemont in Oak Cliff, and then I went to Graivier Junior High and Sunset High School.
Okay, so you stayed there through your high school.
Right, and then when I went to college, I graduated from OU, and then when I came back, I lived in North Dallas because I wanted to be among the Jewish community, which we were in Oak Cliff because my father's business was there, and it was just easier for him.
What business was that?
It was Cliff Food Grocery Store. It started out in Deep Ellum. It was called M&M Grocery, and it was Meyer and Meyer. And before that, my father would help his father, my grandfather. They had a produce cart. They didn't have much money, but they had a produce cart, and they would sell produce from the cart. And my mother worked as a secretary for Mr. Reynolds or Penland, one of them. I don't know which one, but she was his secretary.
Say that name again.
Reynolds Penland,
Oh,
the
yeah,
department
sure.
store.
The department store.
Right, but after she got married, my father didn't want her to work. But she helped him. She had a savings account that she'd saved up, and she helped him open up the grocery business with her savings account. And we found that out later. We did not know this. I mean, she was the quiet voice behind a lot of things that we did not know.
Extraordinary, but so typical of many women of that generation.
Right, and and the mothers in those days, they were really mothers. She stayed home and made everything by hand. She cooked, did everything.
It's typical, and yet it sounds atypical for us today.
Right, right. Well, even in later years, my father had a heart condition. He had rheumatic fever when he was young, and the valve pulled away from the heart. Well, he knew 20 years before he died at the age of 68 that he had a heart problem. So my mother cooked everything by hand with no salt. She'd made him bread, she would make him mustard. She made everything by hand, and the doctor said she actually gave him 20 years by the way she cooked.
Amazing, amazing. And was it strictly due to keeping the salt out of his
Right,
diet?
right.
That's a lesson.
And keep his heart going.
That's a lesson for a lot of us. It sounds like you had a very stable, actually very happy life.
We did. Our parents were set good examples, and they were very good parents. They weren't that strict, but yet, if they told us to do something, we did it. Back in those days, you didn't talk back to your parents.
Isn't that refreshing? That is terrific. How did you decide to go to OU?
Well, half of the Jewish kids went to OU in those days, half went to Texas, and so I just went to OU.
Yeah. Stuart, what kind of profession did you have?
Well, I came back to the family business. It was just kind of expected, and you did it in those days. And then in 1992, my brother and I sold the business. It was getting too much, and we weren't old, but it was getting too much. So I worked in a bank, and then I worked in mortgage companies, and I worked for a law firm the last 10 years of working.
So you kept on working. You're retired now.
Right.
Okay. And then you had your daughter.
Right.
You married and had your
Right.
daughter.
My first wife died in 1976. We got married in 65.
Was she a Dallas person too?
No, we met in college,
Okay.
and she was from Oklahoma City, and her parents were in the clothing business. They had Emmer Brothers, which was a department store in Oklahoma City. So after we got married, we had her, and then she got Hodgkin's and lived about a year. And when she died, that's another way. My family all pitched in. My mother would take care of my daughter on the weekends, and because I worked, and then at night, and they wanted me to be with friends on Saturday night. My sister and sister-in-law would take my daughter one night a week for dinner, so that I wouldn't have to be every night home with her.
Wonderful. Isn't that wonderful? She was truly raised by a village.
Right, and actually my brother and sister and I are still very close. We talk all the time, and it's good that some families aren't fortunate that way, but we are.
I think you were raised that way.
Right.
So that you became friends.
Right.
Rather than only
But when
relatives.
you're little, it's not so much that.
Yeah, that's really. So you were still in the grocery business when you and Harriet met then?
Right.
And that was, I know the story. from her.
We met. Well, it was after the memorial service.
At Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, Yisker.
Uh-huh.
And we met. We were standing there, nobody's introducing us, and so I asked. Actually, my sister's mother-in-law was very good friends with Harriet's mother, so I asked her who Harriet was, and she told me. She said, she's going to California. If you want to take her out, you better call her soon. So I did.
And it was time. You were attracted to her, but it was also time for you to be
Right.
married.
Well, I didn't date for a while, and then after 6 months, everybody kept saying, you're young, you need to go out and start a new life, and I just didn't click with other women that I went out with, so.
And that's very romantic. It is. So you all married, and Harriet said that your daughter, Debbie, was...
Or she took to her immediately.
Wonderful.
And actually, when we got married, Debbie was holding hands with us. The three of us we got married in Rabbi Klein's study because Harriet doesn't like a big fuss over everything, didn't want a big wedding. So we got married in the study, but we had our aunts and uncles. It was 50 of us in Rabbi Klein's office.
That sort of crowded Rabbi Klein's study.
And then there was a reception afterwards.
That is lovely. Lovely. You brought some things to show us, which I'd like very much to.
All right. Well, this was my father's when he was on the city council.
Good. Ah.
And so I thought I would bring that.
Was that in would you say the 40s? Or
No, it was in the 60s.
Oh, in the 60s. Oh.
Yeah, he was on the city council with Mayor Johnson.
Oh.
And actually, he came after Teddy Harris, who was Jewish, and Joe Earl Goldman, I think.
Joe Goldman.
Goldman, yeah, he was on the council. He was Jewish. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there were three minorities on the council. My father, George Allen, and Anita Martinez, and they sat together at the council meeting.
One black, one Mexican, and one Jew. Very good.
And it was funny. And but he was very civic-minded, but yet he was president of Hebrew Free Loan. And here is from Golden Acres, the 25th year of the home of the Jewish aged. He was actually one of the founding members, which I didn't know. I was looking through this the other day and I found this. So
and how wonderful that you saved it too.
Yeah, so
good.
I was going through some of my mother's stuff that were in boxes, and you don't really go through them all right away, but sometimes you go through them and you forget what's in them.
I'm so glad we have the privilege of interviewing you.
Thank you.
This history is so important.
Well, and my parents, when they met, my father actually had a date with my mother's sister. And her grandmother said to my mother, "You should go out with him." So my mother said, "Well, no." But they ended up, because he was 9 months younger than her, my mother thought, "Oh, no." In those days, but they ended up getting married. And they went out on dates on the streetcar. They would go downtown Dallas.
And they were living in South Dallas.
South Dallas. When they got married, they lived on Peabody. I think almost everybody lived on Peabody.
Or Forest, or South Boulevard.
And my mother was born on leap year date, February the 29th. And she said when she was young, they would give them a free movie on the 29th of February every 4 years so that she would go to that.
Oh, that's amazing. And what were all of their names? Can you name them all together so we can?
Well, it was Abe Meyer and Rose Einhorn.
Einhorn. Einhorn. Well, there's Einhorn family.
Right, they're still, yeah.
Oh.
They're Janice Einhorn Weil is the only one left with an Einhorn name. But my grandfather was in the grocery business also, Einhorn, and he was a painter. And my grandparents met in Turkey. Turkey, they were trying to come to America. My Bubby was from Odessa, Russia. He was from Bucharest, Romania. Oh. And my Bubby was a seamstress. And they met because his sister worked with my Bubby. And they wanted to get married. Well, she was 16 and he was 6 years old. He was 22. And her mother said, "You can't get married till you get to America." Well, when they came to America, they got married. But my Bubby spoke 7 different languages. She was very educated, and she knew Hebrew. And she said when they would have services, the other women would get around her because a lot of them didn't know Hebrew, and they would sit up in the balcony in the Romanische Shul.
That is amazing. What a wonderful story, too. And how fortunate that they were able to get to the United States.
Right. Well, now, see, my Bubby's mother was, her Annie Gershkovitz, she became Stone, but her maiden name was Wall. And the Wall's delicatessen were her cousins. And they sponsored them to come here.
Oh, sure. And
that's how they got here.
That's a very well-known family here because of the
Well, we have a big family. Although my Bubby was an only child, that, and I do have a cute story. My grandfather, from my father's side, went to Chicago for a grocers convention. Well, my grandfather Einhorn did not know where his brother was in America because in those days communication wasn't great, and he knew his sister lived in New York. Well, my father's father was talking to a guy at the grocers convention, and he told him his name was Einhorn. He said, well, my daughter-in-law was an Einhorn. Her father was Morris. He said, well, that's my brother. So he came back and told my grandfather, well, he took the train from Dallas to Chicago to see his brother. That's the only time they saw each other in America.
Oh, my.
But, it was just a chance meeting, but they did not know where they were.
About how old were they when they...
Oh, they were grown because my parents were already married. They were older, probably in their 50s.
That's amazing. And they never saw each other after that?
No, because my grandfather died at 62.
Oh, okay. What a story.
But back in those days, communication just wasn't great. But we did have a great family life, and the family was always close.
Your story is exactly the classic for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. I mean, this could be set up as what everybody dreams of an interview. That is just sensational. And you're carrying it on. Are your children involved in the community also?
Well, our daughter is. Our son, not so much, but our daughter is.
That's good. And you are still Temple Emmanuel.
Right, and our daughter goes to Temple, and her daughter was just bat mitzvah, and she married a Dallas native who his father was born here.
And what was that name?
Stanley Harris was his father's name.
And I believe I knew him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Earl is her husband.
Debbie
Yes.
went to Israel with Dada.
Oh, yeah, and Debbie went to Israel for Dada.
Oh.
And she went actually at a bad time when they were stabbing people over there. And we were kind of concerned. But she said the Israeli people treated them, they drove them up everywhere. They didn't let them walk,
Yes. Yes. My daughter's there right now, so. Well, this is an amazing and wonderful story. And I see you have more photographs.
Well, I just have some pictures. Here's me and my father and I when we have of our Model T. We had a old Model T.
Let me get a close-up of that. Look at that. Oh my, look at that. Wonderful.
And then
Wonderful.
this was my cousin Ann Goodman. She was married to Fred Kahn, and then she was sweetheart of Brandeis AZA. And this was when I was Bow nominee the first time. This was at Reva Wadle.
And you were the
Nominee. I was nominee that year.
You were a nom.
That year.
Okay.
But then the next year I was the Bow of Reva Wadle.
Look at that. You were the Beau. Oh, what a handsome dude.
Oh, thank you.
And you know what? You still are. Look at a man who's kept his looks. A fine-looking guy, I'll tell you. That's terrific. Thank you. What year was that?
64.
Perfect.
And then this was at one of our family Sunday dinners with the family.
About when was that taken?
Oh gosh, this was I don't know, I was probably 3 or 4.
And
so
where are you on that picture?
I'm
There.
right there.
You know, this is a family. Look at all of those children about the same age.
And all of our cousins are still in Dallas.
Oh, that is remarkable and a wonderful symbol of
And see
family.
how everybody dressed up in those days?
Yes, we do.
And this has nothing to do with Jewish, but I remember we had the tornado in Dallas in 1959, and this was a picture, it was in Life magazine.
And you kept it. Good for you. That really should be preserved. It's a fabulous picture.
Yeah, and these are just pictures, from the family.
Look at that, yes. Oh, who is that?
My brother, sister, me,
Yeah, yeah, and look at that,
and then
the skirt is what we were.
and then
Good,
this is my mother and grandparents and my brother and sister and me.
perfect. And that's all in Oak Cliff.
Well, this was actually on Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay,
in
South Dallas.
South Dallas, and this was my confirmation.
Oh,
I was in the second confirmation class at Temple.
I mean at the new temple.
At the new temple. And then, of course, this was about my father. It was just, different honors he got.
And wait a minute, show me that father's picture again. Oh, you look so much like him when you were Bo. Look at the similarity. Let me get that closer. Similarity there. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, he was very active. And then, I don't know, he got some kind of honor from Joe Poole that he worked on something when he was on the city council.
Oh my, yes, look at that. Joe Poole, and they named a lake after him.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And then this was one of our grocery stores in Oak Cliff.
Look, let me get a close-up of that. That's fabulous. How many grocery stores?
We had 4 at one time, and then eventually got down to 1, and then it was just too much.
Well, the grocery business changed.
It's hard, yeah. And then this was the store when we opened our major store.
Ah, look, that's a big store.
It was a big store. My father was kind of a pioneer in this time. He was president of Affiliated, and he brought a lot of stuff to the grocery business. But that was before all the big name stores.
And those wonderful independent stores.
Right, we're all gone. But see, this is a picture of him when he was elected with Mayor Johnson.
Oh, look. It's certainly, and Mayor Johnson, I hope it's light enough that we can see that. Mayor Johnson's on the right, and your dad
Yeah, that
is.
one. And another city councilman.
Yeah, fabulous picture.
And that's really, this one they have of the Texas, they already have this picture. This was my father's family.
Oh,
They lived where Little Mexico is.
Yeah.
The Jewish families lived there first.
sure.
And they have this picture because I've seen it in this.
Oh, fabulous.
And then this, of course, is my grandfather and my Uncle Harold Goodman at
Oh,
one of the stores.
That is wonderful history. Thank you. This is just great.
And then, actually, even though we were the only Jewish family, well, one of the few Jewish families that lived in Oak Cliff, there was a big Jewish working population because Maurice Rubin ran the Texas Army Navy store. There was a guy, Otto Chris had a jewelry store. Harry Haberman had one. They were all in Oak Cliff right there on Jefferson. There was I have the other one name. Irwin Gostrich, I guess, and Albert Rudnick. They had stores there. There were a lot of them.
And clustered in Oak Cliff.
Right there, but they didn't live there. They just worked there.
But you lived there.
We lived there, right.
And were you in that beautiful rolling hills place in Oak Cliff?
Well, we lived near the Stevens Park Golf Course, which was a beautiful area, and behind us was a Jewish family, Adlin and Harry Miller. He had a jewelry store downtown Dallas, Miller Brothers. And, they were real nice.
Well, tell us, you had what seems to be such a really happy family life and very Jewishly oriented. And do you have any kind of particular memories of more than you shared, or do you have any advice for people who are coming into Dallas now?
Well, they should get involved with the Jewish community because families are not big like we have. We still have a fairly big family. And other things like the holidays, we used to always spend them together. I remember being at my Aunt Dora's house for Passover, and it was no air conditioning, and it was a long table in the room, and we were all sweating away.
We managed, though,
We managed.
and we had some fans.
Right, and I remember my bubby and mother cooking gefilte fish, homemade, and they would make Humentaschen, and they cooked with schmaltz, you know. Now, my mother didn't cook with schmaltz, because my father, she knew not to. But my bubbies both cooked with schmaltz, and it was really delicious food.
You can just imagine all the arteries closing up.
Well, my mother's father died of a stroke, and I'm sure the schmaltz didn't help.
Were there any things that were dramatic in your family? Did anybody die early? Well, your wife did. Your first wife
Right.
did, of course. And what I love is your story of the family coming together when your first wife.
Right.
So-
Well, both of my grandfathers died at 62, but in those years, that was not considered young. To me, it's young.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But back then, it was not. But
It sounds like a very warm type of a home that you had and family who was,
right.
and everybody married Jewish. Did anybody marry out of?
Not in our generation. Back then, you did not date non-Jewish girls, and the girls didn't date non-Jewish boys. Now today, yes.
That is true. And so, what are you doing in your retired life?
Well, I spend a lot of time with my wife. I go to the gym. We go places and do things. I would like to volunteer, but there's physical conditions that I really shouldn't be around a lot of sick people.
Well, hey, you can come and learn to interview. We have room for you here. I understand that. But there's always room for volunteers. You don't have to be at a hospital.
Yeah, okay.
For sure. And hobbies, did you start with any type of hobbies as a young boy?
The only thing I did was collect coins, which this Jewish guy that worked for us, Bill Kleiman, he didn't have any family. He gave me a bunch of old coins, which I
started your collection.
Right. And he used to take me, he was our accountant, he used to take me to the Goethe Cemetery because he was the caretaker, I guess, or whatever they had. He was responsible for the cemetery. We used to go out there. Is it Zion Road, I think is where it is.
Oh my, that was one of the earliest Orthodox synagogues.
Right. Well, he used to take me out there to the cemetery because he was head of and we would look at the cemetery to see that everything was all right.
I wonder what's happened to it. Do you think that anybody's keeping it up now?
I don't know. When Earl, my son-in-law Earl's uncle died, Gene Rice, they had buried him there, and it seemed fine.
Mm-hmm.
I had a hard time finding it because I know where Sheriff Israel's is, I know where Temple's is, but I did not, Zion Road, I hadn't been there in years.
That was out of my realm too. Yeah, that's very interesting.
But I do remember the old Temple, the old Tefereth, the old Gedazachim, the Sheriff Israel.
All I remember is Orthodox is Tifereth Israel and Agudas Alchem, but now there are quite
Oh, there's a lot of them.
a lot.
There's one right by my daughter's house. So,
Yeah,
and
that's a different world.
it is.
And I'm doing my best to try to start interviewing there also.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, because in our family we have Reform, not religious, to Orthodox. It's the whole realm.
And mutually respectful though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to be.
Well, that's true, whether you're in a family or
Not, you should
neighbors or-
respect, I respect everybody's beliefs, whatever they want to do.
Well, you sound like a person who has grown with the times.
Oh, yeah, you have to change with the times. But we were never taught to be prejudiced in any way. We never used words that other people used. We never thought that way. We were always taught by my mother and grandmother, people are people. My father always said, regardless, everybody puts on their pants one leg at a time. It doesn't matter what they are.
That's what my father used to say.
And actually, when my father was on the city council, he sometimes would come downstairs and would sack groceries for the customers, and they'd say, well, why would a councilman? Well, he liked to be with the people that he represented.
Wait, you said he would come downstairs?
Yeah, well, we had an office upstairs.
Oh, okay. I didn't know whether he was living upstairs.
No. But my grandparents, growing up, my mother, they said they did have a grocery store in front of the house, and then they lived behind. But then they moved to a house that.
Mm-hmm.
And back in those days, their bubby lived with them, and our bubby lived with us half the time, and with my aunt half the time. They weren't nurses. We didn't. Well, they eventually had to put her in a nursing home, but that's because she would wander off, or she would turn on. They had gas heaters in the bathroom. She would turn it on. So it was because of security and safe reasons.
Sure. Well, those are emergencies you have to deal with.
Yeah, they did not want to.
I know. And that was a time where it was an accepted thing for older people to live with their children.
Well, and our grandmother was like a second mother.
She was, yes.
She was always there, yeah.
Of course, and your communication stayed steady and relevant.
Yeah, and she was very wise. Not that she graduated high school or anything, because she got married at 16, but she was very smart.
Now, who was it who spoke 7?
That she was the one.
She's the one. Tell us about that.
She just learned all these languages because when she was growing up in Odessa, Russia, she didn't go to the public school. She went to, because she was an only child and her mother wanted her to be very educated.
And where was that?
In Odessa, Russia.
Odessa. Well, that was a center of a large city. And okay, so she was very talented in languages. Do you remember what they were?
I don't remember.
Well, that's okay.
but I know she would speak Yiddish to my mother when our friends were there, and you know, it would be kind of embarrassing.
It's funny that you said that because I came from a Reform background and Yiddish was a little embarrassing.
Well, now, my mother growing up, her brother was older. They spoke Yiddish at home, and when he went to school, he didn't speak English. Mm-hmm. And they didn't understand with Yiddish, so they taught the rest of the kids how to speak English. Because they learned, you know, that, and my mother, another funny story, when she went to school, back then they started at 7. And they wanted her to go to school at 6 because, you know, it was... So they sent her to school, so they asked her how old she was. She said, well, I'm 7 at school and 6 at home.
That's a good answer, too.
So they sent her home.
Oh, I remember those days. Very smart kid. And now you came from the generation that was college educated.
Right.
Were you the first generation?
Yeah, our parents went to graduated high school,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
But they didn't go to. My mother wanted to be a Spanish teacher, but they couldn't afford to send her to college.
And yet you really didn't know that you were poor.
No, well, my mother said when the Depression hit, it didn't faze them because they didn't have any money before the Depression, so it didn't change a thing.
At least they were in the grocery business, so you didn't go hungry. That is very true.
And she said, really, when she was young, there were horse and buggies here in Dallas.
Horse and buggies. Yes. And unpaved streets.
Mm-hmm.
So she must remember, well, of course she remembers when the first cars came out. And you showed us the picture of the Model T.
Right. So, but yeah, no, she was born in 1912, so they were cars, I guess, already, but they didn't have one.
Oh, right.
And my bubby never drove. Neither one of my buddies drove.
Of course not. I mean, women too, they weren't, the men were the forward
Yeah,
ones.
but they taught, my mother learned when she was learning age, 16, I guess.
This is so interesting. Now, you mentioned Rabbi Klein, that you were, and Harriet were married in Rabbi Klein's study. So Rabbi Olin was here also.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was 5 years old, they had the consecration, I guess, for temple. And I think Rabbi Klein, might have been his first year at temple. Now, Rabbi Olin was already there. I remember Rabbi Olin. And I remember Rabbi Olin saying, if anybody talks to you about religion, you can always say, Judaism's right for me, and whatever you are is right for you, that is fine. But I remember Rabbi Olin saying that.
That's really interesting that you would have remembered that, because that's the kind of philosophy that Reformed Jews have always felt.
Right.
I'll talk to you later about, have you ever heard any of his sermons? There's a...
Oh, yes. He gave fiery sermons.
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, and Rabbi Klein was everybody's friend and rabbi, but Olin was the good sermon giver. I mean, Klein gave okay sermons, but Olin was really the, showy one.
That's right. And brilliant, really.
Brilliant,
truly,
right.
truly.
Well, Klein was brilliant in a different way, but he was everybody's rabbi. Even if they didn't go to temple, if they went to Sherith or to Fereth, everybody knew Rabbi Klein. He was everybody's rabbi.
Well, that's interesting. I had never heard that before.
Yeah, because I know people said, oh yeah, they all liked Rabbi Klein. They all knew him and he knew everybody.
So you've been there through a lot of the changing of the guard.
Oh yeah.
And I think the temple, it's already had its 100th anniversary, hasn't it?
Could be, I'm not
It's
sure.
getting there. If it hasn't, I have forgotten.
But we went to Higher Hall before temple was completed, for Sunday school.
Where?
Higher Hall at SMU, we would have Sunday school classes.
Really? Ah.
And also, the high holidays would be, if I remember, at the Fair Park at the music hall.
The music hall.
And it was one service.
That was when
Olin.
was, yes, but that was while the new temple
Was being built, because they didn't have room at the old temple.
Right. That was 1954 and 55.
And it was really nice because they had a good time. Now it's either too early or too late.
That's right. You have wonderful memories. That's terrific. And I know Debbie your daughter Debbie is interested, and she goes to temple also.
Right.
And just had a daughter who was
Right, and our son was bar mitzvah there.
Oh. But you were not bar mitzvah
No,
because
no. Now see, when I was that age, half of the class wasn't bar mitzvah. No,
it wasn't a reform thing.
no. Now my brother, who was 6 years older, was bar mitzvah.
Oh, how did that happen then, that he was and you weren't?
I guess my mother maybe wanted it, but I didn't want it, so they didn't push it.
Interesting, yeah, and it wasn't a big deal.
No,
No.
but now they all are. But when our daughter was growing up, girls weren't necessarily bat mitzvah. Now they almost all are.
That is very true. It's amazing how things change. Maybe it's a metaphor for how the world is changing.
Well, now when we go to services, we're kind of lost at temple even because there's so much singing in Hebrew, and we were used to the old way.
I agree. Do you go to the monthly Union Prayer Book?
No, we don't go like we should. We go for yurtzeit for our parents and different things. We should go more, but we don't as much as we should.
Well, there's no should about it. You go if you want to. There's nobody counting,
Right.
which is one of the joys. But yes, if you go once a month to the services, they do the union prayer book.
Right, which we're more at home with. It's just because we were brought up that way.
That's right, that's right.
I used to know the prayers without reading them because we had the same prayers over and over.
For so long, and when they have the new prayer, they same prayer, grant us peace, for example, we're going to say it the way we remember.
Raised, right,
And it's just been revised a little bit.
right.
I don't particularly mind so much change, do you?
Oh, I don't mind the change, it's just I don't know what's going on as much as I did when it was like it was,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You're good. You're a modern man to be able to accept the change.
Well, when I went for Harriet's mother and my father's yahrzeit in February, and they had a little bit of a service with with them saying the names. And then they had a concert, which was fine afterwards. I mean, it was lively, but that's okay.
A concert after.
They had a band from Eastern Europe that sang Israeli songs and Eastern Europe songs, and it was fine.
I think that's lovely.
It was entertaining.
Oh, was that the klezmer group?
I think it was, yeah. They were
Huh.
very good. So we were entertained, but yet, you do go for the yahrzeit.
And it is meaningful to hear the names called out.
Because they live through us. As long as we're alive, their memory is alive. Once the last person that knew them is gone, they're gone.
You've just put your finger on why the Dallas Jewish Historical Society was formed in the first place, and why I happen to think its work is very important.
It is important. We should remember every Jewish person that was alive.
And you have given a brilliant interview. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. It's been such a pleasure. And
Well,
whenever you think of any other stories for us that you
Okay.
want to keep down, because now this recording is going to be on our website. You'll have your own copy of it, of course, but it'll be on our website and in our vault, and hopefully that your stories will live on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because the Jewish religion needs to live.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.